Hello and welcome to another episode of the Capital Press Club Legacy Podcast. I'm Dr. Colin Campbell, and this is episode 12. Thanks for joining us. I am joined today by my co-host and engineer and producer, good guy, Derek Kenny, joining me once again.
Good
What's
guy.
up, DK?
Good.
How are you, man?
Pretty good, pretty good. Good guy here in the studio.
Awesome, awesome. Listen, you know what happened many years ago today in Black history? You know what happened?
Yeah. Well, I want to say, I hope it's something regarding Lena Horne.
That's
How's
right.
that?
Lena Horne was born
Right.
1917. Lena Horne, as many of you know, was really prolific in Hollywood and on the dance scene. She worked at the Cotton Club, the famed Cotton Club in New York. She left high school so that she could help support herself and her mother, became a dancer, and then her career just went into acting and dancing, and she became a household name. She also, many people may not know, she suffered with multiple sclerosis, something she didn't talk about very often, but she was a survivor.
Oh,
Listen,
wow.
Derek, you know, Lena Horne died at 92. So, despite everything she went through with MS, this woman lived to the ripe old age of 92 years old.
That's amazing. And as a child of the, I guess, born in the 70s and I guess my formative years in the 80s, to me, she was Glinda the Good Witch. Glinda the
Oh,
Good
yeah.
Witch from The Wiz, the very popular movie produced by Motown, Berry Gordy, featuring Diana Ross, Michael Jackson, star-studded cast, and
Yes.
she was, I guess, the cherry on the sundae, where you have all this goodness, and here you have the most prolific African American actress, trailblazer, literally for many black actresses, when her
Yeah.
career goes back to the 1940s, maybe 1930s, and she's not playing black characters. How cool was that, and how rare was that? Just using our imaginations, because I guess we're not filmologists, if there's a thing, right? But how would you imagine her life to be as an African American starring in these films, and you're not necessarily playing a black character. You're an actress playing a role in a movie.
Yeah, I mean, she was able to do that because of her aesthetic, let's be honest, at a time when, and even now, we can't say we've gotten away from that, where colorism was very much a part of the acting industry. She was able to probably be passing and be allowed for passing in a lot of her roles. And that just spoke to the versatility that she was able to enjoy, being able to play a wide range of roles, not necessarily typecast to her ethnicity, but also to just spread out and have different types of acting roles that would appeal to various parts of the population. Let's face it. Later on, we know that we saw her in Red Fox, the comedy show there. We saw her in A
Yep,
Different
yep,
World. That was one of her last roles on A Different World. And remember how impactful that was when trying to encourage young Black folk to go to
yeah,
college, enjoy the college experience. So she had a wide range of roles from drama to comedy.
yeah. And I think as we talk about how the perception of African Americans in media, not just in the news, but in media, has a profound effect on society at large, but also on the prospects for those that are watching her. They're saying, "Oh, here's an African American woman. I can be an actress as well." Who knows if Alfre Woodard or Holly Berry or all these modern actresses that have gotten their accolades first heard about the storied career of this woman. So it's
Yeah.
important. I guess each time we see someone like this, it's not only the impact in honoring their careers, it's also looking at them as someone that may have blazed a trail or inspired greatness in some of our contemporaries.
Yeah, I think that there was at one point they were considering her to play or to be played by Halle Berry, but I think that Halle went on to play Dorothy Dandridge, portray Dorothy
Mm-hmm.
Dandridge in a play. But I know that she was definitely considered. Halle Berry was definitely considered to play Lena Horne in a biopic. So I don't know if they followed up on that or if somebody else played. I'm not so sure about that. But we do know if there is not a Lena Horne biopic or documentary or someone playing her. There needs to be one. I'll have to do my research on that later on to see who did, because I'd be surprised if there wasn't. She just made such a huge impact in the acting world in Hollywood,
Certainly.
and on TV in Black society that she definitely needs to be exalted
You
and
know,
lionized for the icon that she was.
and for perspective for anybody watching, a lot of her good movies, a lot of her movies she's known for, were 20 or 30 years before the end of Jim Crow, 20 or 30 years before the end of Separate but Equal.
Yeah,
And segregation. So if she goes
yeah,
to a movie set, she's acting in a movie, and then she goes to a bathroom somewhere else that's for colored women, more or less, or she'd go to a hotel that's for colored folks. So not only was she achieving stardom in Hollywood, she was still dealing with some of the same obstacles to full participation in society as other her counterparts that were not blessed to be in Hollywood. So it's like, you have that extra weight you have to carry, that extra measure of excellence you have to carry in spite of the conditions you have to work in. And it's not a fair environment when your other coworkers just come in and they live where they want to live and they stay where they want to stay, eat where they want to eat, and they don't have to think about lunch or where they sit on the bus. They're just going to work and going home. And she didn't have that luxury.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So she persevered through it all, persevered through a lot of social challenges. She persevered through a lot of racial challenges. And of course, we know physical challenges as well, dealing with MS. So we want to just say, give a shout out to Lena Horne, who would have been, who died at 92. And today is her birthday. So happy heavenly birthday, as they say. But we are talking about one of the biggest topics that have people have been talking about this week, and that is the debate. But we're not going to critique the candidates. That's not what this show is about. Our show, of course, we talk about journalism. One of the things that we're going to talk about is the role of journalists in the debate. And so we know that CNN sponsored it, and CNN had their first debate between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. And we had Jake Tapper and Dana Bash as the moderators. And one of the big things that people talked about was Biden's appearance during the debate. They felt that he looked a bit enervated. They felt like Trump basically prevaricated on a lot of questions. All of those things can be debated, right? How important it was for Biden to look vibrant and scintillated, and how important it was for Trump to stick to the issue. But what we want to discuss and what we want to critique is the reaction from journalists after the debate, and if that can sway people's thinking. So, in the debate, obviously, the reason why it's set up is so people can understand the issues and where candidates stand on various issues that affect quotidian lives, how much they can pay for their groceries, how much they can afford for medication, the border crisis, women's right for body autonomy when it comes to birth and birth control, right? So, all of these things, as well as climate change, so many different issues. Where do candidates fall on those topics, and were they conversant enough to really convince the American public or to inform the American public? But what we got, I think, Derek, at the end was more of a critique about how Democrats were freaking out about Biden's performance. And it seemed that journalists seemed to just pick up that story or pick up that issue and run with it with reckless abandon, really not paying attention too much to how they did on the issues. And I wanted to get your opinion on that. I don't know how much of the debate you watched. I did get to watch the whole thing. And yes, like I said, people can definitely critique uh, the current president and his appearance. They could also critique the former president. But what was the journalist's role in trying to, from what I would estimate, to sift through the dross, to separate the pablum from the substance? And I think that's where, in my opinion, a lot of journalists drop the ball.
Yeah, and I'm not, I haven't looked at it enough. I think these days the entertainment value as competes with the news value when it comes to things like this, where you have two of the most popular people, literally, in the country, that will have the most important job in the country during one of the most important times in recent memory for a leader in the United States of America, and one guy who's ongoing story, because both of these guys have ongoing stories or reputations. One being that Biden's been a long time politician, and he's old. He's older now, and he looks old sometimes, and sometimes he looks absent. And this is, in a lot of people's memories, it harkens back to Ronald Reagan, where we didn't realize Ronald Reagan how absent he actually was in the White House. So now you have the potential to know in advance that you may have a president that might be, which is a story, because he is his capability as president, and health. And then, let's actually take a step back. The Capitol Press Club is a nonpartisan organization. We are not telling anybody who to vote for, how to vote. We may have different views, and we do share our views, but we're not telling you who to vote for. And I'm not telling you who to vote for. And
Right.
just
But
opposed to, yeah,
that's why I don't want to
yeah,
talk about the candidates too
hmm
much
yeah,
specifically, but more about the journalist reaction to the candidates, right?
yeah.
This is going to
Well,
be more of a critique on, how did
yeah,
Jake Tapper portray the debate? How did Dana Bash portray the debate? How did some of their colleagues talk about the debate when they were talking so much about Biden's appearance, rather than
right.
did Biden speak clearly about the issues? Did Trump speak more
hmm
convincingly, more cogently about the issues? Who was more
right.
convincing? And so I think that's where the journalists in this particular scenario did a disservice to the American public, because they were focused so much on the optics. And yes, let's
hmm
face it, we are a nation that focuses a lot on the visualization. We
right.
know this from
hmm
the earliest debates between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy, where those who listened to the debate clearly thought Nixon won because they heard a seasoned voice, someone who was more mature. But visually, they thought that Kennedy had won because they saw Richard Nixon sweating a little bit and John
Yeah,
F. Kennedy
yeah.
confident. But in this scenario, everybody got to see everything. So, yes, we obviously are going to make our own assessments over who presented visually a stronger, assertive assessment of the issues, or a show of confidence. But where I think journalists got it wrong is where they should have stuck to more the issues. What did they get wrong? What did they get right?
So I will say, I think in the last election and maybe the previous one, it's become a normal thing to fact check. I think there's been an expectation set forth by journalists to ensure that the information being shared is true and accurate in real time, because technology is there to do that, to be able to provide that. And in this case, they failed. That's where they failed.
Yeah.
To talk about the mannerisms and some of the exciting things that happened during the debate is the same thing as talking about some of the highlights from a football game. The final score is important. The poise is important, but just like you said, sometimes the team with the most highlights didn't actually win the game. And you have two people where one person's known to be a person that doesn't always share the whole truth, or a partial truth, or any truth, and another that the question's all about, whether or not he's able to think clearly and project the presidential aura that we expect from a president of the United States. So you have these two polarizing figures that you're looking at, two ideas about them, and you want to examine if these perceptions of them in popular America are being held true. So I think it's okay for journalists to address the elephant in the room, because people want to know, without having to look at the whole couple-hour boring debate, whether or not Biden looked poised, or whether or not he looked like he was coherent and that he delivered key points. And they also want to know, was Trump telling the truth? And those two things had to be addressed by the journalists. Like, they owe it to the public to try to say to the best of their ability, without leaning one way or the other, trying to objectively say Biden looked a little tired, or he seemed a little slow. Trump looked like he was saying some mistruths, but we don't know. So I think they had to address that. But what they really missed out on, and I think for every substantive political debate, there needs to be fact checking. The American public gets so much bad information, and when journalists have a chance to present information, it should be true. Even if we're just supporting a debate, there should be a way to ensure that information that we're helping to provide to people is true. And I think there's a few things that Trump said that were outright, I think, clear. Well, I won't say clear lies, but after some fact checking, you may find some of the things were untrue. But then, if you do a little fact checking, you may also find that maybe Biden may have lied because he talks about golf, and golf is a lying sport. So, and that was one of the big stories was a little trash talk back and forth about golf, which I thought was cool because that made both of the guys human. And for people that play golf, which I'm a golfer, talking a little bit of trash talk, going back and forth. And for Biden, I think it showed him a little bit, a little spry. And they took him out playing each other in golf, and Biden said, "Well, if you carry your own bag, then I'll play with you." And I'm like, and you're thinking, Biden's going to carry a bag too, And he said, "Yeah, it's interesting. It was, it's yeah."
I had a slightly different take on that. I do know that John King, one of the longtime reporters for CNN, was getting lots of messages from members of the DNC about Biden's performance. So yes, I do think there was a space to talk about it. Obviously, listen,
Mhm.
that was part of the debate, but I just feel like there was a disproportionate amount of coverage and attention to Biden's appearance rather than yeah, doing some fact checking. How much did Trump lie? How much did Biden lie? We do know that through further analysis, and I don't have the specific numbers for you, but both of them lied. But according to many reports, Trump lied more than Biden did. But let's put it out there. Like we said before, this is a nonpartisan organization. We're not trying to sway people's opinions about either candidate either way. This is really more of a critique on media and what media are saying is that both candidates happened to speak some mistruths, but Trump was disproportionately a person who spoke more mistruths than Biden. But again, I'm thinking that conversation on golf. I admire people who play golf. I've never I'll played a full game. Not that I'm opposed to it. I just haven't done
Mhm.
it. I did feel that that was kind of a trivial part of the debate that I don't know if the average person was into that simply because the average person is like, listen, I can't afford my groceries right now. I can't afford my
Yeah,
medication.
yeah.
Two guys are talking about golf, like really?
Mhm.
And let's put it this way golf typically, I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because remember, I'm not a golfer, but I would think it's typically seen as more of an elite sport. Golf is not cheap, right? Like the green,
Well,
you have to pay for like the fees, the golf clubs, which could be hundreds of dollars, a golf glove, the shoes,
not as
the
much anymore. Not as not not
dollars.
not not like it once was. I think it was restrictive in terms
Okay,
of you had to belong to a golf club or a facility
country
that
club,
that
yeah.
that where you can walk over 700 some odd yards of real estate and play a game. But if you go to a movie and you have popcorn and a hot dog and a soda, then you probably spend as much as playing a round of golf. So
Okay,
golf used to be a sport, and I think that more so it was a sport where you needed some type of status. A lot of times you needed some type of characteristics to be a member of these clubs, where you had to be a white person.
right,
And in some
right.
cases you couldn't be a woman. Some cases you couldn't have certain ethnicities or religious beliefs. But now golf is Tiger Woods blew up the whole world of golf because now people realize you could go to a municipal golf course and play with your inherited clubs from your father for $20. And I don't know what you can do
So
for
you,
20 bucks
so you
for four
think that
hours. Yeah, like
right? So
yeah.
you think the conversation humanized
Oh,
them
I think it.
on a like an average level?
Yeah, I think a little. I think the American voters, when you look at somebody who's going to represent you around the
Hmm.
world, we want you to have a little bit of swagger. We want you to have a little bit of trash talk. We want you to be able to number one and also be human. That was a human moment. That wasn't a moment where it was pre planned. It was two guys talking trash, and they gave a little insight into who they are as men. Because someone's going to talk trash to you about something competitive, then you talk a little trash back. And I thought that was a good moment for American people to see that both Biden and Trump were like regular people as well as people that were going for the White House. But it's also looking at all the controversy with Live Golf and PGA Golf. Golf has been top of the mind for a lot of folks all year, maybe the last few years, and that really and looking at some of the key demographics where you're looking at the demos associated when you're marketing to people to play golf, expendable income, disposable
Mm.
time, or disposable
Okay,
income, extra
okay, okay,
time, all these things. So that's
okay. I
an
got you.
important
Okay,
voting block. Yeah, yeah.
so
I'm a little biased.
so
I am a little biased about golf, though. I'm a little biased. Okay.
okay. Now,
Yeah.
let me ask you this then. Let's get back a little bit to the moderators. One of the terms that people are talking about lately is called Gish Gallop, and I don't know if you're familiar with this term, but it's a term that often refers to someone who not just prevaricates, but kind of filibusters and prevaricates at the same time, sometimes throwing out falsehoods, specious arguments, different types of mendacious statements to throw off their opponent. And I'm wondering if you think that the hands-off approach that Tapper and Bash showed for this moderation during the debate was more effective than interjecting and preventing that type of rhetorical expression, meaning someone who just bloviates or pontificates without any pauses.
Oops.
Moderators jump in and stop them and interject? Or should they have a more laissez faire approach like they had in this past debate? Which do you think is a better, more effective way to moderate a debate?
I think you got to let people talk. Now, if you correct them, I don't know how you correct them. I don't
Hmm.
want you. I don't know if you should correct them like they're children, or whether you have like a lower third that shows that's not true, which is kind of disingenuous. But you owe it to these two men, these two politicians, to be able to have their say. Now, if you do find a mistruth as a journalist, you can rephrase the question and ask a follow up question to ensure that the politician is aware that what he said might not have been the truth or may not have been a whole truth. And I think we're doing them a disservice because they're two human beings trying to regurgitate so much information about the things that's happening in the world and things that are important to Americans that maybe we need to find a way to help give people a chance to clarify or recant what they're saying. I think Trump sometimes speaks, and I think we all do that. I think I do this sometimes. We speak off the cuff, and you say things that you believe, but are you saying what's actually the truth? Trump doesn't give me the impression that he's really listening when his advisors are prepping him for anything. He probably remembers 40% of what they've given him or something. I don't know. I don't know, but he
Yeah.
has learned. Well, I think he has learned though is that people will they like the way he delivers information, and they like the bravado that he presents. I think that's what his crowd wants from him. Not necessarily the truth, but they want that bravado. They want some trash talk, some boldness, some unapologetic, standing up type of guy, and I think he gives that. But the disservice that he gives to the people that follow him is that he's not always genuine, and he's not always for lack of a better term, he's not always honest. Like some of the things he's just saying haphazardly without care for what the real reality is. And I think that's a disservice not only for the people that follow him and that may vote for him, but then also for the country as a whole as he goes around the world, maybe speaking in the same way. Where the things you say to the leader of China, things you say to the leader of Great Britain might be half truths. How is he presenting himself differently as president, conducting himself as president on behalf of the American people? Is he the same guy that's saying all these mistruths during the,
So So you're saying like during the debate, they probably should have done maybe a lower thirds with some real-time fact checking.
yeah,
So what I'm hearing you say is basically instead of interjecting and kind of admonishing children, like if you were a parent and saying, no, 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 you don't say that, that's not true. Instead of you let them talk,
mm-hmm.
but at the same time you do some lower thirds real-time fact checking with the truth of what they're saying, whether or not it is truthful or whether or not it is mendacious.
Right.
And that might be a good answer because, or a better solution, rather, I should say, because right now, what we had was a debate where both candidates said pretty much everything, anything they wanted. And we had two moderators with deep journalistic backgrounds, especially in politics, who kind of sat there and listened. They really did not do any follow up questions challenging any statements that may have veered from the truth. The only time they really repeated their questions was when they felt like a question was not answered. And so they reiterated it to try to get the answer out of the candidate. But we saw many times that both candidates, one more than the other, tended to prevaricate and circumlocute and without much intervention or
Mm-hmm.
any kind of regulation. And I think, again, when that happens, if you have a candidate that just goes up there, regardless of their political background, let me be clear on that, and just goes up there and just speaks without any
Right.
type of regulation or being held account to the truth, that does a disservice to the public. And it's almost like, well, what's the point of having a debate? Then it just becomes a political rally at that point, where
Right.
the candidate can go up there, pontificate without any checks or balances. The public listens to it and then absorbs whatever is being put out there if they are not so inclined to critically analyze what is actually being said. And I think that's where
Yeah.
you have moderators who I think need to do a better job of checking candidates
No.
so that the American public can better discern what is truthful and what is not and make better decisions rather than
Mm-hmm.
looking at just the optics or the cosmetics of a debate. Let's look more substantively about the issues, what they're saying about the issues, how it affects American people, what will be the projection if their policies were put in place. I think that's really what Americans are looking for, even though, yes, on our more cognitively indolent days, our thought processes a bit lazy. We like that
Mm-hmm.
kind of WWF pro wrestling type of dynamic of, oh, he got him or he owned him or he slammed him and that kind of thing. That's
Mm-hmm.
fun, I guess, in some aspects of entertainment. But is it really deep enough or profound enough where we can understand what certain policies will impact? Should they be implemented? Should that candidate be voted into office? And I think
Right.
I do believe CNN is rethinking that
Right.
strategy now. I do hear some other
Yeah.
journalists who are a little bit more vociferous
Mm-hmm.
about a different process when it comes to moderating debates.
Now, I have a question for you. I think we talked about media ownership and why media ownership is important, and we also talked about the change of strategy, business strategy, more or less for CNN over the course of the last few years. Changes of who's hosting programs, what types of subject matter they're covering. So they're trying to look less, I guess, liberal, so to speak. Is this indicative from a? And this is not partisan at all. This is just and it's not really about the journalists at play, but we do know that media ownership does have some type of influence over the way things happen within the organization. Is this a reflection of CNN's change of focus from trying to look like they're not as liberal, but they're trying to be more moderate or not
Yeah,
as, you know?
yeah. So we know that over the past few years, CNN has had kind of some shakeups, right? We saw Don
Mm-hmm.
Lemon ousted. We saw Chris Cuomo, two of their major broadcasters, broadcast journalists, being pushed out of their positions or fired, or however you
Yeah.
want to phrase it. And then, of course, we saw some shakeups in the editorial at CNN. And so this is around the time when we saw the former president really trash CNN. We
Mm.
started to hear CNN often derided with the moniker of fake news, which obviously they got from the former president. And so I think that CNN wanted to shed that label. They wanted to disassociate itself from that tie-in together of CNN fake news because that almost became the three-word descriptor, the three-word for that network. And I guess if I was the head of the network, I would try to make moves so that that same repeated phrase would not be repeated so often. I do think that Tapper and Bash were a little bit coy about their aggressiveness and trying to correct and interject because they're afraid of being called out by the former president, which we know he likes to do, especially when it comes to journalists. He likes to create that that us versus them type of dynamic where he is against the media or the media is against him rather, and he has to push back and defend himself and blah 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 and so on and so forth. So I think that those two moderators may have taken a step back, rethought being a bit more aggressive and a bit more assertive and said, you know what? We don't want that heat, as they say, right? We'll take
Yeah.
and we will let them talk and just let them speak it out. But I can't stress it enough that I do think it was an oversight for CNN not to do some fact checking and to let both candidates just speak without much interjection. And we saw the result of that, where again, people were more focused on the optics of the debate rather than the substance of the debate. Last words, Derek, what do you think?
Uh, I think it's up to America. Again, and it's sad that we say that, to have to remind people that it's up to people to do their research, look at different sources. Don't just look at the sources that we find the most attractive. We're mixing CNN today, and they hosted the debate. Look at the different sources of information. Really read the papers. Like read your digital paper or your newspaper. Talk to your family. Find out what issues are important, and then look at the track record. But then I guess the most important thing, as we really focus, zero in on the presidential election, that the local elections mean just as much as well. So as you're paying attention to the presidential election, things that may affect your life most immediately and most often will be affected by the people you vote for in your local elections. So that's my final word. But do your own fact checking. It's so easy to fact check these days. You can just go straight
Yeah,
to Google. You can do ChatGPT.
right.
You can send emails in. So don't necessarily wait for the journalists to get it right or the organizations to get it right. Learn it for yourself. Don't. I'm not gonna say don't be lazy because you don't have to really be industrious to get the truth nowadays or get information nowadays. Get your information. You know what I'm saying? Get your information. Get out there. And the onus again is on the American people. If you're gonna, some of the things that Trump says um, might seem to some as blatant lies, where it's so blatant that it's almost like he's joke. You think that everyone would assume that that's not a truth, But I think, but technology is
Yeah,
there. Use technology
I
individually. Use
yeah,
technology as these organizations to back check and present
right.
information. But yeah, it's an interesting time.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I think that's an argument for media literacy, making sure
Yeah,
that you look at numerous sources, but making sure that they are accredited sources, not your random person on YouTube just putting out without
yeah, yeah.
without any substantiation. So, with that, folks, we will leave you. Thank you for watching the latest episode of the Capital Press Club. Here we go, our audience. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for watching the Capital Press Club Legacy Podcast. I'm Dr. Colin Campbell, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again to DK.